Welcome, everybody, to the 150th episode of the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN Network. It's been a very interesting journey going from Discoville to Union Federation to covering all the Star Trek and Orville things that have been out there over these last few years. And it's an exciting time. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate the 150th episode of Union Federation than covering the final two episodes of Lower Decks Season 3. But to do that, I need a crew, and I need a top-notch crew. And I can't think of anybody better to start with than our top-notch security officer, as well as archival master, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Wow, 150, that snuck up on us, didn't it? Congratulations to Union Fed. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, back in the day when we did a whole episode on disco music.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, wow. God. Yeah. Geez, that was a good one.
and of course, you know, we can't have Discoville without our top-notch holographic captain and ship's counselor, the lovely Amy Nelson.
Hello. Congratulations. 150. That's a milestone there.
Yeah, I'm surprised they've left. We haven't been canceled yet, but that's a whole other story.
Good thing we don't rely on ratings.
I know. Is anybody out there in the cold, dead space?
We rely on fun. That's what we
do.
Yeah, well, speaking of fun, that is definitely what we are in store for, as we are going to be talking the end of Season 3 of Lower Decks. I can't believe it's already here, guys. That flew by.
It did.
I know. It's way too short of a season. So
we are, like I said, it is the end of Season 3 already, but we are going to be talking about Episode 9, Trusted Sources, and Episode 10, The Stars of Night. And it's good we're doing these two episodes together because they tie into each other quite a bit. So without further ado, let's get that warp drive going and start our missions. Now, before we do anything, we got to do our customary. That is right. Spoiler alert is in effect. We are going to be diving deep in these two episodes of Lower Decks, giving all of our thoughts, our opinions, and who knows what else might come out of our mouths because it is Lower Decks. But we are here. We're going to have a lot of fun to talk about these episodes of Lower Decks. And Miss Nelson, would you care to get us started as we discuss the end of Lower Decks and give us our first mission log synopsis? Maybe it's a little Boimler style in there?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
But I will say that Freeman's Planetary Revisitation Initiative, Project Swingby, is approved. Admiral Buenamigo assigns her to visit Onara, a planet whose population were forced to quit an addictive substance, Felicium, due to Jean-Luc Picard's actions 17 years earlier. To Freeman's dismay, they are to be accompanied by journalist Victoria Nuzay. Love the name. Freeman cracks down on recreation and controls Nuzay's access to crew, hoping to project competence. Finding Onara thriving and uninterested in Federation aid, Freeman and Buenamigo decide the Cerritos will visit nearby Brecca, whose sole industry had been Felicium, in hopes of justifying Swingby. After Mariner circumvents Freeman to speak with Nuzay, Nuzay confronts Freeman about many embarrassing details of past missions. Incensed, Freeman immediately transfers Mariner to Starbase 80, a dead-end assignment. Mariner is rendered heartbroken by her mother's actions and the angry approval of her crewmates. The Cerritos discover a depopulated Brecca occupied by the Breen and are narrowly saved by the Alito, a fully automated Starfleet ship of the new Texas class. Nuzay's report is heavily critical of Freeman and reveals that the embarrassing details were gleaned from careless statements by the approved interviews, while Mariner had only glowing words for the ship and Freeman. A remorseful Freeman tries to reach Mariner at Starbase 80, but learns she has resigned from Starfleet and is now Petra Aberdeen's first officer, setting off for parts unknown.
There was a lot going on in this episode, a lot of Trek references, a lot of just interesting and fun developments that happened in here. So I want to give you guys get your first impressions and first thoughts of this episode. Miss Nelson, would you care to go first?
Yeah, my first reaction, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was telling a great story. I just had a really hard time with Freeman. I know it's just a California class. She's not, Enterprise, but we've had now 2 seasons of her trusting her crew and building that relationship and giving them time off so that they're, mentally healthy, and just to see her flip so quickly, that was difficult for me, but I loved the episode.
Mr. Reitzel.
I could see where Amy's coming from, definitely. And you felt like there was a trust kind of going on there, and that why she would assume it was her daughter. I can see why, but finding out later that wasn't the case. Maybe she needs to have a little talk with her senior staff, because that's what they have that room for. But I like the build up to what was happening here. Is it weird that I kind of want to visit Starbase 80 and just kind of see what it's about? Maybe kind of tidy up a little bit. I don't know.
There's been many a rumor if you go to Starbase 80, you might never return. I'm just saying.
I mean, someone's got to drop off supplies there, or maybe sandwiches. I don't know, but yeah. But yeah, I was kind of wondering where this was going, and then when I saw the animated Texas class ships come in for the rescue, I noticed that they were all kind of lit up red. I'm like, red means evil. This is gonna go well. Usually, I love the design of the Texas ship, so I got to mention that. But the shout out of the Texas names I thought was funny too, as well as the California class. We'll touch on that later. But this, I guess this was kind of trying to be an episode where Freeman and Mariner, where I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna somehow come around onto this, and maybe it makes their relationship stronger. Maybe this was like the straw that needed to be tested, I guess, so to speak. It was tough to watch because I found it hard to believe as it was happening that Mariner would throw intentionally bring Nuzay in to kind of, I'll tell you how it really goes, because it leads up to you thinking that she's going to be doing that and she's going to be the cause of all this and stuff. But it seemed a little too on the nose. So I was kind of curious to see where they're going to go with that. But I love the episode. I like the Nuzay thing going on. I thought that was funny. And all the references to TNG. I absolutely loved.
Yeah, we're going to be getting to those references here shortly. As far as my thoughts on the episode, you talk about Freeman, and yeah, it was out of character, but I can see where it would happen because, one, you put the TV spot camera on somebody, and they always want to try to put their best foot forward. And in Freeman's case, because she's trying to get respect for the Cerritos and the California class and this Operation Swing By, which is her idea, she becomes overzealous and over cautious in a way. By the book, because we need to make an impression, instead of letting her crew work in the best way possible, because she's trying to make a good impression for the viewers of this news story as well as Starfleet regulations. And so there's a time where we will sometimes overcompensate to make sure we're trying to make a good impression. And in the long run, we're probably actually making things worse by overcompensating than we are actually just doing it the way we know how to do it and coming across that way. So I get that with Freeman. I thought everything with the aspect of Mariner, it was interesting, but it wasn't shocking. It felt like, yeah, I can see this is how this is going to go. And I wasn't necessarily surprised by it. I was a little surprised in the aspect, though, that it really didn't feel like Rutherford or Tindy or Boimler really made an effort to try to get the situation righted. They were just like, there's nothing we can do. She's gone. And it's like, we can't cross the captain. The decision was final. And that seemed more out of character to me than how Freeman was, in the aspect of, at least Freeman had a reasoning to be that way. But this episode was a lot of fun. And like I said, they had a lot of references to TNG and so many other things in this episode. Guys, we got our usual cast here, but we did have one person who did a little double duty this week, because Alison Becker, who played Victoria Nunes, also voices Jennifer.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Nice.
So she pulled a little double duty this week. So I found that to be very interesting as well. But Kevin, you did a phenomenal job as always of digging through the archives and finding some interesting articles to talk about. Would you mind if I dove into this for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so you went into the archives, into the Trek Core, and found a very interesting article, kind of reviewing this up, going over this episode, but bringing up a lot of points from it. I want to give credit to Alex Perry at Trek Core, Star Trek Lower Decks Review, published October 20th, 2022. Trusted Sources, the penultimate episode of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, delivers a big shakeup to the status quo. We have got just in time for next week's season finale, and what feels like it might be more of a part one than it lets on. Trusted Sources by Ben M. Waller packs a lot into his 25-minute runtime. The USS Cerritos has been approved by Starfleet to test out Operation Swing By, a concept developed by Freeman that appears to date back to her realization in the season 1 finale, No Small Parts, that the races that Starfleet contacts might not stay on the right path forever. To herald dawn of an expansion of this California class's mission, Starfleet assigns a Federation News Network reporter to cover the first examples of Operation Swing By. Freeman, desperate to look good in front of the reporter, Victoria Nunez forbids Mariner from speaking with her. But when Mariner defies Freeman and speaks to the reporter anyway, all of the blame for the reporter's bad impressions of the Cerritos fall firmly on Mariner. But there's a twist when the reporter pieces airs. It becomes clear Mariner spoke highly of Freeman and the Cerritos. It was the rest of the crew. Go figure. But it's already too late. Freeman reassigned Mariner to Starbase 80, where she's decided to resign from Starfleet and link up with Petra Aberdeen, the Vash-like archaeologist from Reflections. Meanwhile, Project Swing By experiences a lot of complications after getting a polite brush off from the Narians of TNG symbiosis fame, and the Cerritos is attacked by the Breen when they attempt to reestablish contact with the Brekka of the same episode, and are rescued at the last minute by a new class of automated Federation starships. Now, guys, I want to kind of stop here because we didn't talk about this when we gave our thoughts. Did you feel like this was the first part of a two-part episode, or did you just feel like this was a standalone episode, not knowing what we were going to get in episode 10 yet? Kevin?
I kind of had a feeling, especially with, Mariner being sent to Starbase 80, because I knew there was going to be another episode. And so I feel like they've been doing a good job of connecting these episodes together, whether it's kind of like maybe not an official two-parter. Like, we got a lot with TNG. You'll have part 1 and part 2, but sometimes you would get that two-parter where they had two different names. I can't remember what it was, but I feel like they do a good job of without telling you that it's part 1. And I like that idea. They don't tease that this is part 1 of 2. This episode leaves on its own little tiny cliffhanger, which I like about that. No, I didn't. I didn't feel it was a standalone. I felt that they were leading up to something, and with the stakes as high as they were towards the end of this episode, I definitely felt like, okay, yeah, this is going somewhere for the season finale.
Amy, what about you? A couple of things I think are interesting here is the fact that they interviewed so many different people across the ship, including the dolphins, as we see here. So people know there's dolphins in Starfleet now?
Well, of course they do.
And I mean, did you feel like this was an episode when it left off that there was going to, not that this was a two-part thing, or did you feel like that maybe some of the status quo of maybe Freeman being away for a little bit longer than what we could have possibly have thought?
Yeah, it definitely did feel like a two-parter, in part because Captain Freeman was just acting so crazy, and we needed that resolution and that her trusting her crew back again. Just at the very end, having that realization just for me wasn't good enough. So I knew there needed to be a little bit more. And then also with Mariner, that last act, it's like, okay, so there's definitely more to this.
Yeah, and the Freemans were a big part of this episode. Kevin, did you?
Yeah, I just want to mention the Operation Swing By. I'm glad it's becoming a thing, a real thing. Because if I remember correctly, back when we were first covering this series, it was Haley that mentioned that older Star Treks and stuff, we would see what would happen with the planet, and the crew would somehow help fix it, and then they take off and never leave them again, and never see them again. And I like the fact that Lower Decks there's an actual starship whose job it is to come by and check up on you guys after maybe the main Enterprise D-ish type, flagship starship crews do their thing. And I like that this is this show's thing now. And I think it's important to check up on other races and colonies and seeing how they're doing, if things were left okay and things were fine. And I love how they go by the planet, was it Onara, and the people that were stuck on being fixed to this thing that the other planet was providing. They're all fine and healthy now. And, Ransom is saying, I live 250. These are my type of people, this type of thing. And just little things like that, I think, are great. That I was kind of curious how this show was going to find its thing in Star Trek, not just become something funny, not just become something that is going to reference all of Star Trek that we love, but have its own thing. And I think it's found it. And I like where this episode ends too, with the season finale, that the California class has a thing. And I love that.
Very well said.
Yeah, I want to, very, very well said. And I want to get back to the article, because one of the other things they talk about is Freeman and Mariner in this episode. The article goes on to say it's a lot of different ideas, but it's fun to see the show weave together more elements of its own backstory into new tales. The conversation between Mariner and Freeman, from no small parts about their frustrations with Starfleet's blasé attitude towards second and third contact, returns in this episode as Project Swing By, and it's fun to revisit these two races from symbiosis. Trusted Sources is also really successful in laying in and executing its twist. The audience, just like the crew of the Cerritos, are so conditioned into expecting Mariner to be the wild card and the problem that when you discover that she isn't, it's a genuinely surprising turn of affairs. It's a credit to the growth that we've seen from the character over the last couple of seasons, and a signal about how that growth might continue for the character moving forward if she returns to Starfleet. Now, at the time of this article, we didn't know what the fate of Mariner was going to be, but I think it's a great point, because I really think this episode really showed how much Mariner has changed as a character from the beginning of Lower Decks to where she is now. Talking, the Mariner that came on in the first episode would have destroyed the Cerritos with this reporter. And now having the respect she does for not only the crew, but her mother as the captain, really shows how much they've developed Freeman over these 3 seasons, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes these 2 episodes, when you combine them together, so great, is that we get sort of a review of her character in this episode, and then the culmination that she really does want to belong in Starfleet. And so that character arc is just set up perfectly in this episode.
Yeah, well, I agree. Kevin, what about you? I think it was it was a very interesting choice to make this twist. But yeah, the growth of Mariner has just been really a spotlight for this season, I think.
Yeah, plus it's important that we see growth, and we'll get into that more in the next episode, because as funny as she can be, wanting to do fun stuff with her crew, whether it's the pie eating contest and such like that, which I was kind of hoping to see. But, what's important is she's a natural leader, whether she wants to be it or not, whether she wants to accept it or not. She's shown that time and time again. It's just that there's something within her that doesn't want to take on some extra responsibility. I think she's enough to where she wants to be the alpha personality in the room, but she doesn't want to be like responsible for everything. And when you're a captain and you're in a situation like that, you're responsible for everything. You're the person that people are going to look through. She basically wants to be the big fish in a small room. And I've seen situations to where when people are taken out of the big fish in a small room, put in a bigger arena or a bigger, place, that they don't always thrive. And I think there's something within her that is afraid of that. But with her friends being around her and supporting her, and the dichotomy with her mother and stuff, I'm glad to see that we do see a leap in that. Because I was kind of worried at the end of this episode that she was going to fall backwards so much because of what happens at the end of this episode when she takes off with the archaeology girl and going to kind of do her thing for a little while outside of Starfleet. And so I was kind of curious to see where that was going to come back around in the following episode. But, I see there's something within her that she's fighting that she doesn't want to make that next step.
I think those are all very good points, Kevin. But it wasn't just Mariner who had a lot of development in this season. So far, I think all of our main Lower Deck characters had development, and the article wraps up with this. This season, the Lower Decks really does feel like it is attempting to move its characters forward in a significant way from where we met them at the start of the series. Each of the 4 Lower Deckers has gotten some level of meaningful growth this season, ranging from Bold Boimler and his experiences in Crisis Point 2, Paradoxus, Tendy's acceptance of her family history and her desire to be a leader, to Rutherford's exploration of his past and who he used to be, and now significant signs that Mariner has found ways to channel her rebellious energy more productively that serve herself and her shipmates equally. This episode has a strong Redemption Part 1 vibe to it in that it ends with a character off the ship, though Mariner gets a lot less support from her colleagues than Worf does for his decision to stand and fight for the Klingons. Mariner didn't get a long line of her colleagues wishing her well as she headed to Starbase 80, which seems like a genuinely awful place. I'm excited to see where next season's finale takes us. Amy, you are who I go to for Next Gen. Were you getting some Redemption Part 1 vibes from this episode?
Wow. No, I didn't even think of that.
I didn't either. Yeah. I like the comparison though.
Yeah. Now I see
I think it's a very good comparison there. And it played out very interestingly. But Kevin, you have done some as yeoman's work this week as far as finding some Trek tropes. Would you care to share with us some of the things you found for this?
Yeah, I got a few I'll throw out here. There's a lot to choose from, so we'll just pick out a few here. You would think that in nearly 900 episodes of Star Trek, one of the previous series would have used the faux documentary interview by a camera trope used in sitcoms like The Office and The Modern Family as a central conceit for the episode. But I think this might actually be the first time it's been used in Star Trek. I thought this was interesting. The only thing I could think of would be Star Trek, what was it? Star Trek, I guess, Generations in the beginning, where there's like a couple of little news reporters that show up on the bridge, but not really done in this kind of docu-series type thing. And come to think about it, Amy, wouldn't it have been fascinating to have seen this maybe happen on Star Trek or Deep Space Nine, where we actually get a news crew? Because I can't help but think that there is news and there's an actual news company with, maybe officers part of it through Starfleet, right? I mean, who's going to report the news?
Well, I guess the closest thing I could think of, and I like your tie-in to the Enterprise B and at the beginning of Generations, I guess would be Jake Sisko writing about the war there. But he didn't have the camera, so it wasn't this type of trope,
Right. Yeah, definitely. The Ornarans and Brekka were previously seen in the first season of Star Trek, the Next Generation episode, Symbiosis. This episode even includes a decent synopsis for the events of the Just Say No to Drugs Kid episode from season 1 in a case you can't bring yourself to revisit it. And of course, they had that wonderful mural that explained everything, which I thought was great.
I loved that mural.
I want that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. For those who might be watching this on our YouTube channel, we got a picture of that up right now. So
yeah. Admiral Buena Amigo suggests that Freeman asked the Ornarans to show their government, quote, just in case it's secretly run by kids or something pretending to be the devil, the latter referring to the Ventax 2 in the case of Ardra's appearance on the TNG episode Devil's Due, which is one of my I think it's one of the most underrated TNG episodes, Amy, because that was a great kind of like courtroom drama. Let's prove everyone wrong with this. And when Picard turns the table Trek style and takes over the planet and he starts doing the snap the fingers and everything, I thought that was a good reference there.
Yeah, I got the devil reference, definitely, because Devil's Due.
Yeah.
Hello, it is a fabulous episode. So secretly run by kids, is that a TOS reference reference?
I think so. Yes, I think that was
Those
was.
kids that were controlling.
Yep.
Okay. Look at me getting a TOS reference. I'm glad this is a podcast that will live on forever.
The shuttle from Starbase 80 that arrives is the TNG style shuttle pod, which has not been seen since the early years of Next Generation, along with the officers' TNG era comm badges. This shows how far behind Starbase 80's technology is compared to the rest of the fleet. Man, I got to tell you, these would make some great cosplay.
Oh, you know it's coming. We know that's coming. There's not even a doubt there.
Let me see if I got one for here. Trusted Sources has to be the most meta title for a Star Trek episode ever, clearly referring to all of these so-called news sites. I say that with air quotes, that published unfounded and patently ridiculous rumors about modern Star Trek, based, of course, upon what they hear from their trusted sources that they never name. So there you go. There's some tropes for you.
Well, no, Kevin, there's some observations too, because I think this is very important.
Please feel free.
We were so disappointed with this. Blueberry pie is a perfectly respectable flavor for choice for a pie eating contest.
Would you want to be? I don't know. I'm more of a strawberry guy. I want to see it all red. That's
cherry. I need some cherry.
Cherry.
I need cherry.
Anything but cherry. That I didn't appreciate seeing all the blueberry wherever Mariner walked. It looked like she was bleeding blueberries. And
my OCD was screaming during that scene.
Yes. And it kept on going even as she's walking around the corner. I'm like, it's still there. I mean, that did make me chuckle, but it was annoying.
No, so I think the blueberry thing is great. I love the reaction though of Rutherford for the pie eating contest. I haven't eaten 2 days. He's like, just give me a slice. I can't do that, as he destroys the pies going forward. So now, guys, this episode did set up what was going to be the things for the season finale by introducing us to the Texas class, including the USS Aledo. What were your guys' first impressions of the Texas class?
Well, like I said, if you're going to have a bunch of red light rim around you, it's kind of evil. And the fact that it was being controlled, as we find out later, by a Badmiral, there you go. But the design is great. That's one of the best things about Star Trek Lower Decks is that even though it's animated, it still feels Star Trek and real with the design of everything, including when they introduce new aliens or new ships or what have you. But still, then you refer to older alien species, not older as an age, but previous alien species that we know Star Trek has visited and talked to. And it's made it feel real world Star Trek, but in animation. And I think they've really done a good job of that, especially with these Texas class ships.
What about you, Amy? Did you like the design of the Texas class, or were you?
Yeah. When they were like, oh, here's another ship. And I'm in my mind trying to think, okay, who's it going to be? We've already seen the Titan. It can't be them, and I was just trying to think of what ships. And then I saw it. And with it, being so flat, I first thought Defiant, but no, the nacelles. And so it was, it felt very Star Trek, very beautiful. And you're used to seeing some red, on the nacelles, but then that red on the rim, and you're like, what is that? So that was a little hint, and I loved it.
The only AI that is acceptable as a good AI with any kind of red involved is Kit. I'm just saying it now.
But even Carr used a little bit of that,
Yeah, but Carr didn't Carr have a yellow, Kevin? Wasn't it yellow?
I can't remember. It's been too long. But yeah.
But
the evil Carr.
Yes, the evil Carr. Kevin, you did find a few very fun Easter eggs as well.
Yes. So Victoria arrives aboard the Cerritos in a Type 6A shuttle with the registry NBC 77567. The same shuttle was seen near Space Dock in Season 1 Star Trek Lower Decks Veritas 2020. Though its name was not legible, it was unknown what ship it was when it was attached to. where its name is revealed to be Redwood, which, based on the naming convention of the Cerritos shuttles, would indicate that it is also from a California-class ship, the Redwood Forest and stuff like that. So, yeah. The crew of Starbase 80 wear the style of comm badge with the gold oval behind the Delta emblem. At the time this episode was set, those badges were more a decade out of date, in keeping with the Starbase 80's reputation of deficiency.
That was funny. I did recognize the comm badges.
So do you think that they use like the season 1, was it handheld Hoover style vacuum phasers? Remember those big ones that they had?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
Yeah, they might have original series phasers still, for all we know.
Yeah, I know. When Admiral Buenamigo introduces the USS Alito, a fully automated ship, to the Cerritos bridge crew, on the LCAR's screen fills the Cerritos view screen. One of the display panels has random vertical and horizontal line segments strobing on and off slowly. This is similar to the M5 computer display. The computer was once tested on the USS Enterprise to see how it would control a starship automatically. And last but not least here, when Captain Freeman calls Starbase 8 to talk to Mariner, the crewman who answers looks up Mariners on a 1980s era Rolodex card holder instead of something electronic. This further shows how backwater that Starbase 80 is. I got to tell you, being a physical media collector, that kind of gave me the giggles.
Yeah, that was about that might have been the fun. Yeah. That might have been the funniest moment of the episode. I got to be honest with you. Yeah, Kevin, you might actually really fit in at Starbase 80 now.
Hey, if they're rocking an old DVD VCR player, I might be happy. Who knows?
Amy, the amount of comparisons and things they pulled from this episode. Lower Decks is pretty famous for this, but I think this might be at the top of it for the most references pulled on this episode.
Well, yeah. And what was wonderful is that, again, it's setting up the season finale. And so all of the references to itself from previous missions, give us the wrap up feeling of, oh yeah, I remember when, this happened and that. So it just, the references now to itself is just as funny as the references to previous Star Trek series.
Kevin, I mean, it's nonstop. I think that episode is still referencing things from Star Trek, even though it's over.
That's what we love. That's what we love about this series. But I like the fact that it references it. At first it kind of felt like they were just referencing it just to do it, just to bring us into the world and connect them to what we've already seen. But they're making use of these references now, which is what I like. The story is revolving around these references now. And that knowing that whatever Star Trek that we watch in the future, if they visit a planet we never see again, it's nice to know that there might be a lower deck ship somewhere that's going to revisit these people and still make sure they're still okay. Or are they?
Good points. Guys, any final thoughts on this penultimate episode of Lower Decks Season 3? Amy?
No, I want to talk about the next one.
Kevin, should we just move along now?
Yeah, let's move along here. The next one's a good one, so let's do it.
Okay, so we are going to teleport out of this mission and get ready for our next mission, because you know what, guys? We might even have a Admiral in the next episode of Lower Decks. So without further ado, and before we beam down to episode 10 of Lower Decks, the season finale, we're going to take a quick break and tell you what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we are back. Well, hopefully you're enjoying everything that's happening on both the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN Network, because there's a lot of interesting things going on right now. But getting back to it, is time for our second away mission as we dive into episode 10 of Star Trek Lower Decks, the season finale. The Stars at Night aired on October 27th, 2022. Miss Nelson, for the final time of this season of Star Trek Lower Decks, would you care to give us the episode mission log?
Yes. In the wake of Victoria Newsay's embarrassing expose, get it? Starfleet opts to follow Admiral Buenamigo's proposal to decommission all California-class ships and replace second contact duties with his automated Texas-class ships. Captain Freeman challenges Buenamigo's ships to race to run their duties. Rutherford is intrigued by the new ship's programming. Meanwhile, Mariner becomes suspicious of her and Petra's mysterious benefactor, but learned that it's funded by Jean-Luc Picard. She confesses to Petra that she may have been searching for a reason to return to Starfleet. During the race, the Cerrito barely keeps up with the Texas-class ship's capabilities and loses when the crew must pause their work to rescan for life on a desolate planet. Freeman realizes that the Texas class failing to stop and scan proves that the ships are inadequate to handle second contact parameters. She informs Buenamigo about reporting this information to Starfleet. When Rutherford bursts in, he recognizes the Texas class's AI programming as his own and has realized that the shadowy Starfleet official who erased his memory was Buenamigo. Buenamigo reveals that he set up the Cerritos all along, hoping they would fall in favor of the Texas class. Rutherford warns him not to bring the ships to full automation, as the AI code is the same as Badgie's and could result in aggressiveness. Buenamigo ignores him and brings the ships online, ordering them to destroy the Cerritos to cover his tracks. But they attack the starbase, killing him before attacking the Cerritos. Hopelessly outmatched, Freeman sends out a distress signal, which is answered by Mariner and Petra, who also summon all the other California-class ships to assist. The Texas-class ships are defeated. Later, the crews of the California-class ships celebrate, and Freeman apologizes to Mariner, who forgives her and rejoins the Cerritos. T'Lyn arrives as the science department's newest recruit under Tendy's mentorship. Meanwhile, Rutherford's original implant, along with the Badgie's corrupted AI, are collected from the Cala system by an unknown source.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Guys, this was an absolute joy of a season finale. There was so much going on and so many references to things that had happened in previous seasons of Lower Decks. And, we get bad rolls, we get evil AI, we get a Tomb Raider version of Mariner. So much going on. Kevin, I want your first thoughts and first reactions to this episode.
Yeah, I liked how she got a little Tomb Raider / Indiana Jones action going on, especially with the.
I was
idol
thinking of
thing
you with that.
You know, she's swinging across that carrot. I love the fact that the Ferengis are like the natives chasing her. You know, that, and she has like the gold idol thing. I thought that was great. The other thing too, it's just I don't know what it is. I love the ship that Petra owns and flies. I love how the nacelle is like only one on the side of the ship. I thought that was a really cool ship design, and I didn't want that to go unnoticed. It was really, really cool. But the fact that they're funded by Jean-Luc Picard, Mr. Archaeology man now, I love that. I'd love to see those meetings, you know, Petra and Picard just kind of hanging out. And yeah, I love that. I think that's great. So yeah, Buen Amigo, Badmiral. I love him with the cigar. Just kind of swinging the cigar a little bit. It looks very extra evil there. I think that's cool. When they were doing the race to compete the, I'm sorry, what have we been calling them? The second contact duties, I guess. I don't know how an automated ship is really going to do. Yes, it can drop off and replicate things and drop things off easily and take off. But when you do second, I guess, these second missions, these second contact duties, the second flybys, whatever you want to call them, there's some humanity that needs to go into these things. You know, you really got to kind of check up on these people. You can't just drop off supplies and take off. So, I mean, I see why that was done, because it was done for racing and trying to get all this stuff done. But I'm kind of curious to see how Buen Amigo was going to do that part. But I like how they called him out on it by not checking on this possible micro life form, because that's important to do, as we've seen in Star Trek and famously in TNG as well, you know, especially with the exocomps, you know, how we found out what they were about. But I like the fact that was a point of contention that was brought up, and that he was afraid that might get out there and stuff. But I liked where this was going. I liked the I would say the resolution of Mariner and Freeman, you know, finally coming to an understanding. I think I hope that they aren't at each other's throats continuously again. I think we've gone past that. But I like the fact that even it was her idea saying, look, I want to do more here. And I'm talking about Mariner. The fact that she was willing to volunteer to be under ransom, where we've seen her previously not want that, you know? So I like that she had made that step, saying that, okay, maybe I am ready for more.
No, all very good points, Kevin. The ship that she had, you know what it reminded me of? It looked like it might have been a ship from like Battle Beyond the Stars.
I could see that. Yeah, definitely. It was a really cool ship design. It wasn't Starfleet, which I liked. It definitely felt like you know, we saw, as you know, Amy, that when it came to using ships in Next Generation, which this series makes a lot of references to, they sometimes reused stuff and changed things up a little bit, which I'm fine with. I love when we can notice that. But I felt that ship was just another cool design that adds just to the richness of the starships throughout Star Trek.
I also now want a Lower Decks Picard crossover somehow, even if it's just like Picard on a comm and you hear like Freeman's voice come over from when she was on the ship, or the other character's voice come out, just, you know, like making a quick call to Picard and Picard answer. I just say that would be amazing.
I would call out for a full episode. Have Patrick Stewart come in and just be him. You know, that would be awesome. You know,
that'd be great. But Amy, I know you really are anxious to talk about this episode, so please, the floor is yours.
Well, one thing that I really felt, I mean, this episode brilliantly made everything right when it was going wrong in so many ways. Like with Mariner and Petra, I loved that back and forth and how she started questioning, and that, okay, I'm going to check things out, and then the mistrust, but then really trust, you know. But that she was stealing the artifacts that were stolen and giving them back to museums. That's their mission, right? Yeah. And I'm not sure. Yeah. And that it's tied to Starfleet. So tangentially, they are working for Starfleet. right?
Yeah.
I mean, Picard is Starfleet. You look in the dictionary, there's his picture, right? So I love that even though she's trying to break away, that's where she finds it. And that is just so perfectly circled right back around to Starfleet. And it just, it just circled right back around with Freeman. And that's finding, yeah, here's life. We're going to stop. And then realizing that's the trick into defeating the Texas class. And yeah, there's no way that automation can do a diplomatic mission. And that's what, these flybys are. So it's weird that Starfleet would even consider it, but I'm just going along with the ride on that.
Bad admirals have very strong convincing. That's one of their superpowers.
Yes, that is their superpower.
Can we give a shout out to Ransom teaching others about the leg over the chair Riker move?
Yeah.
Come on. Yes.
We're going to get into that more here shortly too, Kev. One of the things too that I really, really did like about this episode was the fact that when you talk about, the fact it's diplomatic missions, but it's also, you have that moment with Tendi where she thinks she might discover life. And, how's an automated ship? If it just does a scan and doesn't go by that, you have to have that human element in there. And I think that was so important that they played that up. And I really, really think as far as Mariner goes too, is that yes, she's back, and yes, she's going to follow the Starfleet way a little more, but she's still going to be Mariner. So there's going to be times where she's going to get under her mother's skin, just like I think she intentionally wanted to go back with Ransom just so she could continue messing with Ransom in a way too. So there's still going to be that mischievous side of Mariner as well. So I think that's going to be very fun and interesting to see how that plays out. But for me, this is by far the best Lower Decks finale we have. We've got a little more to talk about, but I want to save for just a little bit as far as how this episode truly ended, because I think it's setting up something big for season 4 of Star Trek Lower Decks. But Kevin, there was one other thing. I loved how Rutherford has now unlocked his enhancements, and the last view we see is the Predator infrared view.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was a cute move there to show that. That was funny.
Any comments on the cast, guys? Anybody stand out, or anybody in particular you want to point out from the season finale?
It was pretty much the same group of people that we've gotten into. I'm liking Carlos see if they say this right, Alazraki as Mr. Buenamigo. I thought he was really good in both of these episodes, and I like that he's become a thing. I like the fact that we have a Badmiral. I think it's great.
One other thing, Amy, too, we have a new crew member introduced at the end of this episode. We've seen this character before in a previous episode of Lower Decks. So we have a Vulcan now on board for Lower Decks.
Oh, yes. Yes, so that was very nice to see. And she's going to do great.
A Vulcan paired with Tendi, Kevin.
Yep.
Yes.
Not sure how much that is going to work out, but that's going to be an interesting thing. But Kevin, you also found an amazing article from our friends over at Den of Geek. Anthony Pascal wrote this episode. I'm going to let you dive into this, because this gives the way he wrote this brings forth a lot of really good point-by-point basis.
Yes, Den of Geek here we got here. So yeah, The Stars at Night, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 10, debuted October 27th, 2022. Season 3 wraps up an exciting, funny, heartwarming episode as a long-running character and plot arcs come together with some unexpected twists. Analysis tied up in a bow. In the series' best finale yet, Lower Decks brings the action but never forgets to bring the funny. It's densely packed with jokes, character drama, lore, and heart, and it's now clear that writer/showrunner Mike McMahon was playing the long game this season. The show sticks the landing of the season, has focused on character by bringing each of their arcs home in a satisfying way and even finding ways to weave them together. However, Mariner's exit and re-entry to Starfleet and easy forgiveness, she blames herself for it, had the same kind of sitcom oversimplicity that plagued the previous episode. At least she didn't forgive Jennifer's cruelty. That bridge should stay burnt, opening up more possibilities for future seasons. You can't break up this family. Don Lewis continues to shine this season, carrying much of the load for the episode as Captain Freeman becomes more central to the show. While often a bit erratic, Freeman here shows why she is worthy of the captain's chair, even adding maximum warp me to her catchphrase and borrowing Jean-Luc's make it so for that beautiful moment of giving Shax his greatest wish. And like Shax, everyone got to have their hero moments, from Billups to Boimler, as this show celebrates its own mythology, exemplified by the fleet of California-class ships coming to the rescue. Sure, seeing a legacy hero in ship could be fun, but it's no match for Fly Boimler. There are also ties going all the way back to the show's first episode, including Douglas Station and the Galordonians, as part of embracing the series' own growing lore. And speaking of going back, T'Lyn from last season's best episode, Weidouge, is a very welcome addition to the crew. So I just want to stop there, guys, because they are tying a lot of things together here with all the character arcs. They're all having their moments, having them shine, do their things. But I did want to mention the one thing, the which might kind of seem like a sitcom series wrap up of the tension between characters and maybe in a plot or something like that. The thing between Freeman and Mariner, as we touched on earlier. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this, because I didn't have a problem with it, because this is done in a sitcom sort of format where we get like 25 minutes to, go through an episode. But what's cool about this, though, is that we got 2 episodes to tell it, which I'm fine with. And the fact that I mentioned earlier that we get Mariner wanting for herself to do better. So I just want to kind of get your guys' thoughts on how well that they've brought back these other character arcs and how they're bringing them all together, and they're even building on their own lore. So Kyle, your thoughts?
I thought how they handled it, I agree with you, Kevin. For the format and how it worked really well together. I got a shout out to the Shax moment. Was absolutely wonderful when he's running down the corridors and everybody's kind of giving him the slow clap, and the moment of his life. I thought that was one of the best parts of this episode. What I really liked when you talk about this is the fact that they really feel like they're really bringing them together now as a crew and as a family, which is obviously a big thing for a Star Trek crew. And I think it's very important, because I really think what they're setting up for season 4 is going to challenge them as a family. And I think, especially with Freeman and Mariner, the fact that they're also mother-daughter, there's just sometimes between family, you don't need to say it. It can go unspoken and you just know. And I think that was kind of the case with Freeman and Mariner too, is they both know how they are, how the others can be. So there's a general understanding there. They had their few words. You didn't need to go into it in depth and have this in-depth conversation, because they're family and they know each other. And sometimes you just roll with that. Amy, you are our ship's counselor. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I didn't see it as sitcom-y. It felt actually pretty natural, especially when you look at the progression. Remember, it was season 1, I think it was episode 4, when it was that mother-daughter tension when they were climbing the caves and, yelling at each other. And then they were able to come together and work together. So we've been seeing them have struggles, work it out, have struggles, work it out. So this progression is natural. And so, yeah, we don't need to see it again. We had an entire episode way back in season 1. Now we get to see, the fruits of all of that labor. So I really liked their connection. And I really feel that it's that turning point. And like what you said earlier, Kevin, I think we're done with the mother-daughter tension being a major plot. It may come up just as a comedy routine, but I think it's done as a story.
All right. The article goes on, because there's some references here in the article that I thought were very funny. Carol makes this look easy. Jack Quaid is also worth praise. If for nothing else, his hilarious impersonations of Ransom, Tiana, and Shax. And that's just the tip of the comedy iceberg, with laughing out loud moments throughout. From Tiana's writing crop tirade about spending 7 effing years on an O-berth. I laughed at this, guys, because I don't know if you know what an Oberth ship is. It's the medical ship that's the big round ball in the front that I think that we see also in the last episode, or at least a version of it in TNG. It's basically the medical ships. And I thought this was funny because her mentioning that being on an Oberth ship is kind of like, you don't want to end your career there. It's kind of funny. To Billup's demanding data level isolinear chip work, to Mariner trading quips with classic Ferengi. But Ransom's command that chair demonstration of the Riker maneuver may be a standout, even with all the heavy characters and plot lifts go on. And unlike extended portions of the previous episode, this finale never forgot to show it is a comedy and kept delivering. That brings up an interesting point. Do you guys sometimes forget that this is actually a comedy, Amy?
No, because I'm laughing all the time and I'm going along for the ride. And yeah, sometimes, I'm like, well, that was weird. Okay, just enjoy it.
Well, I bring that up because I think detractors of this show, maybe the comedy is a little uneasy. They're used to something maybe a little more serious with a little bit of comedy thrown in. But they really ride the comedy train here, Kyle.
We're flipping.
They do, but you expect that from the people who bring you Rick and Morty. But we've talked about it, especially in this season. I really think they've gotten a lot more balance with it to where you do feel like you're watching a Star Trek show and not just a comedy Star Trek show. And I really think that they really are starting. They really hit their stride. And I think as they progress into later seasons, it's going to be, the comedy's still going to be there, but it's kind of like the Orville. It's going to be more storyline based with the comedy a little bit more in the background as they continue to grow Lower Decks. Probably not as drastically as the Orville kind of leveled out on the comedy, but I still think that's where they're headed, where you're going to have story here and then the comedy is going to be below it, where it used to be this way and now it's going to be flipping as the show matures.
I want to address the Badmiral thing for a minute here, because they actually address something interesting in this episode that most Badmirals don't. Bonamigo, the article goes on saying, Bonamigo turning out to be the bad guy is another Star Trek trope Lower Decks openly embraces. Many fans also saw this coming. Tying it all to Rutherford's arc was clever, and it's going to be fun looking back on the whole season to see the clues. However, the degree of his corruption and brutality for completely selfish motives was on a whole nother level than the usual bad faith admirals Freeman's talking about, making it a bit hard to buy someone this evil could make it this far into Starfleet. Sure, we have some baddies, but they usually have had some kind of vision or different viewpoint justifying their actions and weren't up for killing off whole Starfleet ships just to get another pip. And it looks like there is more evil AI in the show's future, with risks getting tiresome, but maybe worth it to get more badgy. Final thought, season 3 was the best yet of Lower Decks, and this episode was a perfect example of how the show has whole new confidence in finding humor and its own characters and lore while embracing classic Star Trek. The finale tied things up nicely, leaving very little hanging for the next season, which was ordered long ago and is already well into production. I wanted to bring up the Badmiral thing, guys, here, because Buenamigo in this episode refers to how he felt like, there was a legacy thing going for his character, basically. And that, he was trying to get to a certain, level. He was trying to, get promoted. And when it comes to Star Trek, as so well described in the last season of, that other show that we like called The Orville, that it's not about getting paid. It's about your legacy and trying to do better and trying to see how well you can go and what you can leave behind, what kind of tracks you can leave for the work and the effort that you put into. You kind of get the feeling in this episode that Buenamigo kind of plateaus and he doesn't quite get where he wants to go. He's got 3 pips, not 4. And so this may be adding to his frustration with this whole Texas class thing, and maybe this would have been his legacy. This would have brought him up to like the level of awesome admirals out there that haven't turned to Badmiral yet, or at least that we know of. But did you guys notice that, Amy, that he was frustrated? This is why he kind of took this turn to make sure that his legacy lives on albeit a nefarious way that hopefully he was hoping to hide.
Yeah, and I too thought of the Orville, and that's how we survive. That's what we're living for, because we're not living to make money. We're doing something that we have passion for, and if you have passion for it, then you're going to do it the best. And so Bren Amigos had a passion for Starfleet, but now it got muddled with power and legacy. It's a slippery slope, that if you're trying to be your best, then that means you've got to be at the top. I don't know. That's maybe that definition of best needs to change.
Kyle?
I think part of this is he talks about being stuck. He can only go so far, and everything he tries, he can't get any farther. And I think this is kind of actually an interesting thing to talk about with both the Orville and Star Trek, because you're doing these things not for money, but for your legacy, for your recognition, which means you're also feeding your ego. And if your ego is not getting fed the way you need it to be, you can crack. If you feel like you're stuck, and some people can't deal with that, and their ego runs rampant on them. And I think that's what's kind of happened with Bren Amigo here. His own ego and his own desire to advance and make himself at this level, which he can't seem to get to, leads him to just snapping and doing, going to desperate measures. And yes, do I think he was necessarily planning to have it go the way it did? No, but he was definitely planning to be like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can do to get to this next level. Risks be damned. And unfortunately, the risks really backfired on him here. And I think to the point where he completely snaps by the end of the episode, where he's like, can we just cover it? We don't have to. And he's just like, no, and he knows what his fate is now. And it'll be interesting to see if we ever see this character resurface in a way in Lower Decks somewhere down the road. I think that would be an interesting follow-up, because that's one of the things we rarely get, is a revisit of a bad role after they've been discovered and their plot's been foiled. You always kind of wonder what happens to some of these characters. And I think Lower Decks might be a fun way to kind of, even if it's just like a one-shot thing or something like that, to kind of follow up on that. But Kevin, there is one other thing I wanted to bring up before we move on to our Easter eggs, trivia, and tropes, and that is, does Jonathan Frakes get royalties for this?
I have a feeling that Ransom probably has like some very, I'm not going to say sexy picture of, number one up there on his desk or workout room or something like that. But I think he idolizes, a certain bearded admiral now up there. I think I'm just going to say.
No. What I have is this envisionment, much like if you're watching something on YouTube. He has a holodeck sequence that he just practiced that maneuver over and over and over with a Riker teaching him how to properly do it.
Yeah, or a T-shirt that says Riker does it best or something, So yeah.
Kevin, you also found, as always, too, a ton of Easter eggs, some tropes, and just some bits tying in with canon here. And this, much like last episode, this one had a lot into it as well, and some great laugh lines as well.
Yeah, I want to just throw a couple of laugh lines here, which I thought was funny. Was wait till you see the uniform; it has 4 epaulets. That was really good. Rutherford, stop being impressed with things stealing our jobs.
I felt for every grocery store worker right now when they were doing that.
The other one I laughed at too was, I'm still wiped from all that Ferengi mocking. That was very funny. But we got some trivia here as well. Captain Freeman orders a maximum warp, and a moment later, Boimler announces that they're holding at warp 8, confirming that the California class has a maximum cruising speed of just warp 8. That's incredibly slow compared to its contemporaries, such as the Galaxy class at warp 9.6, Intrepid class at warp 9.9, and the Sovereign class at warp 9.995. So here I go. The 24 California class starships named in this episode are in alphabetical alphabetical order. And yes, these are all California cities. The Alhambra, the Anaheim, the Burbank, the Carlsbad, the Cerritos, the Culver City, the Eureka, the Fresno, Inglewood, the Merced, the Mount Shasta, the Oakland, the Pacific Palisades, the Redding, the Riverside, the Sacramento, the San Clemente, the San Diego, the San Jose, the Santa Monica, the Sherman Oaks, the Vacaville, and the Vallejo, and the West Covina, and the Santa Barbara. I just made that last one up because I live in Santa Barbara. We need the Santa Barbara. Come on.
Exactly.
You got a whole TV show.
A lot of the people running the show probably have a home or have visited Santa Barbara. Come on, guys.
Santa Barbara had a whole TV show. Come on now.
Brother tells the AI, you better stop attacking or you're Dunsel. This is a reference to the Star Trek TOS episode, The Ultimate Computer, which was also about replacing humanoid crewed ships with AI run ships, in which Kirk is referred to as Captain Dunsel. And Spock explains that Dunsel is a slang term for a useless item. Ooh. And last we have The Stars at Night is a line form from the 1940s popular song Deep in the Heart of Texas. And this episode was about automated Texas-class ships that Buen Amigo commissioned.
Okay, Kevin, I have to stop you. If you're going to say Deep in the Heart of Texas, you have to do it right for Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Deep in the heart of Texas.
Well said. Yep.
Yeah. Amy, you look like before I chimed in, you had a thought you wanted to add in there.
No, I was just going to do the clap afterwards.
Oh, there we
Deep
go.
in the heart of Texas. Probably messed
Okay, guys.
that up big time.
Before we move forward here, we got one more thing to talk about because there was a stinger, Kevin, to the season finale. We got this rather ominously.
Badgie.
The return of Badgie in Rutherford's old implant. Guys, I'm going to say it right now. Next season of Lower Decks is all about the evil AI. I think that's where they're going.
What is up with it? Why? Why do we need evil AI? I'm not happy to see Badgie again. I'm sorry.
I think between the start of it with these automated ships, what we had with Peanut earlier in the episode, and also from a couple seasons ago, our favorite evil computer, and you know what Starfleet's going to do. They've got them all together. Badgie's going to somehow raid that jail, and it's going to be on, and it's going to be a year of the rough AI. Maybe like a little Skynet kind of thing there, Kevin, for Lower Decks.
I can see where Amy's going here, but this was a plot point that was left dangling. And so they do have to refer to it to maybe, hopefully we'll get some closure on Badgie here. But yeah, I mean, they've touched on a lot of AI, you know, whether it's the evil computer prison now that we've seen or what have you. So I just hope that it doesn't, it's not an ongoing threat. Like I hope they come in and maybe do an episode or two and then resolve it and kind of move on. But they have to leave something for us to be hanging, and they've done a pretty good job of leaving us with a little bit of a cliffhanger for the next season. And although this one is not as intense as the last one from season season 2 to season 3, but I think that they had to leave us with something, because that is a dangling plot line. They left that out there. So, but I hope it's not an ongoing all season 4 thing, Amy.
No, remember, because they're setting Lower Decks up. It's episodic. The stories aren't going to continue, but the character development will.
Yeah.
So yeah, we may have 2 or maybe even a 3-parter. I wouldn't put it. And plus I don't want to see anymore. I'm loving this format of have the story start, middle, end. But your character development, that's what we get to have the big arc for.
Yeah.
So I will agree that it's probably going to be a big Rutherford arc next season.
Yeah, I would like to see that brought to a conclusion. I think that would be nice. Yeah.
Now, guys, even though this is the season finale of Lower Decks, we're going to see Lower Decks crew, at least some of the Lower Decks crew, well before we get season 4 of Lower Decks, because let us not forget, we do have a crossover with Strange New Worlds next season. that is going to be happening with Lower Decks. I'm still curious to see how they're going to pull this off. I don't know how exactly what the plan is, but at this point, I have a little bit of genuine excited curiosity about this more than anything.
I don't understand. I was thinking it would be feasible if the Lower Decks was watching some video of, Strange New World crew and then have them be animated. Like that makes sense to have Strange New Worlds on Lower Decks because they could look backwards, but they're in different centuries.
Well, maybe this is where the AI comes in. Maybe the AI does a little something. It's not
time travel.
Time travel.
Time travel.
Or time travel. More Star Trek time travel.
Yeah. I'm very curious. I have not wrapped my head on how. I don't even have an idea.
Yeah, I am the same way. But guys, we are at the end of season 3 of Lower Decks. So before we kind of wrap things up here, I just wanted to give each of you a chance real quick to give us your final thoughts on this season and where do you feel Lower Decks is at from where it started and what might be coming ahead? Kevin?
Lower Decks to me has made, for me, Star Trek, that's a good way to put it. It's become destination television for me, where Strange New Worlds also did as well, but Discovery did not. I watched Discovery just on loyalty when it came to it, so we can also talk about it and podcast about it. But I didn't get excited for the next episodes like I did with this one. And this was a series that really kind of, with the new Trek era, really got me excited about what they were going to do next, because it wasn't just about talking about and referencing old Trek. It was building a name for itself. It was building good character development, great world building as well. Let's just throw that out there. It's building its own legacy with characters and starships and threads and stuff like that. And I like that they're building not only on what was laid down for previous Star Trek and referencing these worlds that they have to visit again for whatever reason, which also builds great drama, but they're introducing new characters, which is really good. And we're getting them, they're popping up again. They're just not showing up for an episode and going. And I like that. And that there's drama there, and that we're getting character development from animated characters, which is great. Cause I remember watching Family Guy for the longest time, and then I got kind of burnt out on it because I felt there really wasn't any character development. It was like the same jokes over and over again. I guess if you just want to watch it for that reason, that's fine. But I wanted a little bit of character development, and I feel like this is an animated series that's giving me sitcom / drama character development with these characters moving forward and not backward. And I thought this was a great season finale. I loved how it came together. I love how the crew came together, and they're leaving us wanting more. And that's the important ingredient for a well-told series, is that you are excited about what's going to happen next season. And you're not just kind of, I'll watch it because it comes out, but I can't wait to see next season.
Miss Amy Nelson, your thoughts on where Lower Deck is and your thoughts on season 3.
Wow, Kevin, that was so beautiful. It's hard to follow up after that. For me, I really agree with you that it is like appointment TV. I look forward to it. It was interesting, on Paramount Network. Picard was on, and I was watching it, and I was like, I just wasn't that interested. And plus, it's in the middle of the story. It was in the middle of season 1, and it's like, well, I can't get the whole story if I just want to watch a little bit. Anyways, Lower Decks fills that in for me. And I agree, Kyle, with what you were saying. Like, we've had these 3 seasons of the characters getting to know each other as we are getting to know the characters. They've had their conflict, and now they're gelling. Like, they belong. They're a family unit. And so we've had those seasons to get there, and now we can sort of flip that and say, okay, they're family, they're together. Now let's go out and have adventures where we don't have to have that internal strife as much, I feel. So I am really looking forward to see what are the stories that they're going to tell with them as this family.
I think that's the big thing for me. I look at how Lower Decks started and where it's coming at season 3. It's to me, it's about the character development. That's the heart of Lower Decks. Lower Decks is part of the Star Trek family, but I think this show represents something that is so important with Star Trek, and that is the character development. I think that's something that we've obviously discussed lacking with Discovery. Even Picard in its own way with developing its newer characters. I think they could have done more with those characters and developed them. And obviously, Strange New Worlds has only had 1 season, but we felt we got a lot of character development from that. And I think it's also because of the format. And I think Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds represent that Star Trek is at its best when it is telling episodic formatted shows, not overarching thing, because I think there's too much that gets lost in the chaos of the overarching story. Lower Decks is also something that I think Star Trek desperately needed at the point it came out. It's fun. And yes, I understand it's not the kind of fun that's for everybody, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. That's one of the one things that I will say about this grouping of Star Trek shows in this modern era is the diversity of it. There is something for everybody. Yes, we're not big on Discovery, but that doesn't mean there's not people out there who love what Discovery is doing. The same thing with Picard, the same thing with Lower Decks, and the same thing with Prodigy. Strange New World seems to be universally loved for the most part, and I think we all know why that is. Lower Decks, though, it's something entirely different from anything ever made in Star Trek, and a lot of people went in negative, and I think it's won a ton of people over because of the connection and bond we have with these characters and how they're written and how we can relate to them. And I think that's where Lower Decks has exceeded all expectations and was what makes it great. And like I said, I really feel like this was the season that finally brought Lower Decks together as a full family, not, you have the Lower Decks and then you have the bridge and those divisions. Yeah, you really see the Cerritos now as a full ship and not just this side or that side. And I think that's going to really reflect in season 4, which I am very excited for as well. But this is going to wrap up season 3 of Lower Decks. Any other final comments either of you would like to get out before we head out?
I just wanted to ask Amy, because Amy, you've been to some conventions and some cruises and stuff like that, more than Kyle and I have. So you've been in touch with your fellow Star Trek fans, and whether it was maybe them not getting as much representation as you were hoping, what is your radar when it comes to the fandom that Lower Decks has built among the fans at conventions and in that social arena?
Well, the Lower Deckers, like the actors, have come out full force. They're there. The uniforms are a delight to cosplay. They look good, vibrant colors. They photograph great. So then you've got that merchandise that's out there. Everyone's cosplaying. Everyone's talking about it. And in talking, yes, there are some Trekkies, whatever, who, Discovery's not their favorite. Picard's not their favorite. Some don't like even Prodigy. I don't know why, but it seems like everyone just loves Lower Decks. And it's so great to see. I mean, it's just, encircled in love. I think the fans love Lower Decks.
That's awesome. That's good to hear.
I mean, it's so fun when they come on stage, everyone chants Lower Decks, Lower Decks. And it's the whole crowd. It just brings everyone together. It's so wonderful.
That's awesome.
Well, we are going to transport out of this away mission and tell you where you can find the Fandom Podcast Network, the BQN, and what the Orville Prophecy has in store for Union Federation as we start on our journey of another 150 episodes, hopefully. Okay, guys, I put the communication disc out, and I think I'm about to intercept some subspace signals. Okay, as always, you can find the Union Federation on both the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN Network. Of course, if you're watching this on video, that means you're on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. Please give us a like, give us a subscribe, and share us out. We want to bring joy to everybody and have some fun, and we'd love for you to join us, whether it's in video format here on YouTube or on the FPNet master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. But you can also find the Union Federation on the BQN, Miss Nelson.
Yes, you can. Very excited.
One of the developments.
One of the
big developments. It's one of the big developments over this first 150 episodes.
I know. This partnership between networks, I think, is very good. We should have done it sooner.
We have it now, and it's going very well. Of course, you can find us too on the Union Federation Podcast Facebook page, where we keep you updated on all the happenings on Star Trek, and of course to the BQN Collective as well. Amy, you can email us at theunionfederation@gmail.com. You can find me, Kyle, on Twitter at AKyleW, or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people find you on when you're not hanging out at Starbase 80? Because there's no cell signal out there.
Why did I think that that's the place Kevin would be?
I'd go just to check it out. Just don't leave me there. You can find me, of course, in the Union Federation Facebook group there, celebrating both Star Trek and the Orville. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. And you can also find me on Facebook.
And Amy, when you're not assimilating things out there, where can people find you?
Well, over on BQN, there's a couple podcasts. All Good Things, which we are running through different episodes that have a similar theme. We have these series that are real fun. Over on Galaxy Class, talking my favorite series, Next Generation, and that's real fun over there. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but favorite place is in Facebook for sure.
And of course, too, we would be remiss if we didn't dive into the Orb of Prophecy, guys, because the trip is just maybe ending for Lower Decks, but the Star Trek animation quest continues because it's back. In fact, as of this recording, episode 1 of Prodigy has hit the airwaves. We will be back in 1 week's time to discuss the first 2 episodes of Prodigy. Prodigy has been a absolutely pleasant surprise. I didn't know what to expect from it. Besides beautiful animation, it's a very intriguing story. And of course, that also means more Janeway coming our way, Amy.
Yes, very excited. The trailer or preview that we got, and the evil Janeway, I'm so anxious to see.
and I have a special request for all of our wonderful listeners out there, because I am on a quest for Mr. Kevin Reitzel, because my goal is by the time we cover get to the end of this current season of Prodigy, we have somebody who has helped us out so kindly, because Mr. Reitzel is in desperate need of a stuffed Murph. And I know they're out there. Fans have made them. I've seen them at some conventions. There's not an official one that's out there for sale. But if any of our amazing listeners out there could help us out, please reach out. Let us know. We are in desperate need of a stuffed Murph, because Kevin needs something to keep him warm at night.
Yeah, need my Murph. Need my stuffed Murph.
And Kevin, I just got to ask you, we are getting ready to dive into Prodigy. I know that you were a fan of Prodigy. Are you looking forward to getting back into the tales of this most interesting crew in Star Trek lore?
I am. I was getting emotionally invested in the crew, and but I'm very curious how visually they're going to take this show going forward, because it's one of the most amazing animation I've seen and done. Telling the story about a Trek show, I find even more fascinating. So it was just visually stunning, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
As am I, and I haven't watched the first episode yet, but I remember watching the preview and hearing the word morphosis. So we got to see what that's all about. But yes, so we will be covering Star Trek Prodigy starting next week with the first 2 episodes, and coming soon later in 2023 in February, the return of Star Trek Picard for its 3rd and final season. We are also anxiously awaiting the announcement of the return of Strange New World Season 2, which is obviously going to have some Lower Decks ties into it one way or the other. And of course, Discovery Season 5, which we did talk last episode about a brief trailer that they put out for that. Guys, before we close out too, this is the 150th episode of Union Federation. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, of course, our top science officer, Haley Stoddard, who's been out with a little bit of sick bay and having to take some personal time, but we miss you. We love you. We know you're going to be back with us soon and can't wait for that. Also to Kevin, we've got to shout out the man who helped found this, Mr. Norman C. Lau, one of the original founders of the Fandom Podcast Network, and helped us create Discoville, which eventually became the Union Federation.
Yeah, we love you more, Finn. Sorry. Still thinking of Murph. Norman is one of the co-founders of the Fandom Podcast Network, and appreciate everything that he's done. And he's been able to come back on from time to time, and he's doing a great job on Mission Log. And we want to thank you very much, Norm, and wish you all the best as well.
Absolutely. We wouldn't be here without you, Norman. So thank you. But for now, until next time, thank you to this absolutely wonderful crew. It's been a pleasure podcasting Star Trek and the Orville with you guys, and I'm looking forward to a very long time to come of it. It's been a joy, and it's one of my highlights of doing podcasting is podcasting with this amazing crew who has become my family. So thank you guys. And with that, until next time, hailing frequencies are now closed.